Today we are joined by Finance Director of the Forward Party, Andrew Yang's Forward Party, and full disclosure, one of my best friends for many, many years now, Kait Saier. What's up, Kait? Thanks for
Hi,
joining us.
thanks for having me.
Not
Oh,
after this
absolutely.
interview.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We'll see how this goes. So I just want to get started. I mean, this is a question. I obviously know the answer to this one because we've been friends for 10 years now, I think.
Yeah.
But I'll play dumb for the audience's benefit and just ask about your background, working as basically a Democratic operative for a long time, your experience doing that, and how and why that led you to jump ship and join the Forward Party.
Yeah. So, as you said, you've known me for a long time. You knew me when I was working at Barnes and Noble. So you watched me enter the political world, which was interesting. So I've always been a Democrat. I actually grew up a little bit about my background. I grew up in Kentucky. So a Democrat in Kentucky has always been an interesting place to be and place to be a Democrat. As a teenager, I was very politically active, did Teen Environmentalists of Kentucky, which was really fun. We would just raise money by holding concerts out in the middle of a field. And it turns out people don't have to support your issue to want to go and just hang out with a bunch of other teenagers. It was pretty easy to raise money that way. So got into politics, really living in New York City, studied political science at Hunter College, and started working for the Democratic Party. Worked there for a long time, not like official Democratic Party, Democratic candidates, and started on the federal level, actually. Did some New York stuff, moved to Boston, did state and local politics in Boston, all Democrat. My firm was Democratic. Then I started my own consulting firm and had Democratic candidates up and down the ballot throughout the country, and also worked for a couple of super PACs and nonprofits that were progressive and on the Democratic side of things, and went through all of that process, worked through kind of high levels of government, consulting, mainly fundraising, some strategy stuff, and kind of came to the realization that nothing was happening. I've been basically a staunch Democrat like my whole life. I've actually come like slightly more progressive as you've seen over the years, Keaton, in our conversations. You've convinced me of some issues that I've become more left on, but
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, but I've become just like more and more disaffected with the Democratic Party. I was watching myself put in all this effort for issues, for fundraising for candidates and people that I really believed in, and people that I like knew really well and loved quite a bit, and just be sucked into this machine that they had to say, the talking points. We had to raise money from certain things. We had to not raise money from other things that didn't really fully make sense to me. And then for what? Like nothing to happen, no needle to move at all. So I was basically at this point in my career where it was like, keep moving towards like the establishment, stay with, the established elected officials that I had been working with for so long, or jump ship and do this new thing with Andrew Yang, and listen to him being interviewed by Barry Weiss, actually, who is someone I really admire for just standing up for what she believes in. And I think I really was just like, dang, I really want to do this. So
I mean, that quality runs in the family.
Yeah, yeah, it does. So actually this is my coworker's favorite story though, because I was so nervous about my career and this risky move, because it was a risky move. We're doing something unprecedented here. I got drunk and sent in my cover letter, and the next day had an interview and was hired. So
Well,
Yeah.
look, there's something to be said for that. I mean, when you make decisions like that under the influence, when you're under the influence, yeah, sometimes you're not as smart as you are when you're not, but you're also less inhibited, and in a way, you're at your most honest, right?
Yep.
When you're in that state. And so yeah, it obviously was a good move. I mean, you're being both very modest and very prudent by not getting into too many details, and I won't get into too many details either, but I just want
I will. Okay, so as an insider,
Yeah.
you say they're not doing anything to move the needle.
Hmm.
Okay, I've gone with the assumption that our entire political class is trying to realize the prophecies of the Book of Revelation. So don't you feel they're moving the needle in that respect?
Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're just making it worse, and they're bringing on, the end of the world. That's basically
I've always assumed once you become an insider, you walk into a cavernous room where they're all wearing black robes and there's a goat there and a kind of curved blade and all that.
I can't go into specifics, right? I'm still scared for my life.
yeah, right,
No,
exactly.
I'm kidding.
You can't talk
No, but
about it.
I mean, look, without
don't wanna
getting
get
into
too
like, I mean, like I said, without saying too much about who you worked for, I know who you worked for, and I just want the audience to know when you say you worked for elected officials, these were very, very, very high up people. I mean, you worked for some huge name people to the point where, like, I remember there was one time where you had to drop something off at our apartment when we were living in Beacon. And my wife says, yeah, Kate has to come up here anyway because she's going to be campaigning with so-and-so, the person you were working with. They're doing some campaigning up north of here. They're going to pass right by us. They could just swing by and drop us off. I'm thinking, whoa, I don't want this fucking guy knowing where I live. Like, no, they're not dropping anything off. No, are you crazy? So anyway, really, really high up work. And, like I said, without getting into specific conversations, I would recall you would go and you would fundraise and you would go and you would meet with people. You would take the train either from D.C. or the city. You would go travel hundreds of miles to meet with maybe one or two very wealthy people and raise money.
Yep.
And you'd have to wine and dine them for sometimes half a day, sometimes a day, right? And so, like, those conversations, do you think those conversations have something to do with why the needle does not move? Like, aren't certain assurances made to people before they write a big check that, hey, the party's not going to go here and there, right?
Yeah, there's definitely agenda building, in, not in
Agenda building. That's good. See, you're a pro. You know how to say all this shit without, you know how to say what you mean without going too far.
You have to promise
skill.
that nothing will fundamentally change.
Agenda building. That's a new word. I gotta remember that.
Yeah, there's some agenda building. Yeah. To Russell's point, certain not changing, or during the Trump years, bringing things back to normal. And there was a moment during the Trump years when I'm working, for Democrats, and I'm thinking, we got to bring things back to normal. And then I started thinking, what the hell is normal? Like, I wasn't super happy before Trump. I wasn't super surprised he got elected. And then Biden was our best option. And bringing it back to normal means what? Selling out to corporations, not getting anything passed in Congress. And that is really kind of what did it for me. Is I told myself I was giving the Democrats one more election cycle, and I didn't even last another election cycle. So I left, went to Forward. I'm just glad Andrew existed to give me a home. So one thing that I've been saying is Forward is very much a home for the politically homeless. And I feel very strongly about that. And just the people that I've met, I'm traveling the country, and the people that I've met who are part of this now and who are interested in joining are incredible people.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Forward Party. So why don't you explain? I mean, so you, as I understand it, you're basically functioning. Yes, you're a party and you might field candidates, but you're also functioning as sort of a PAC now also.
Yeah, actually, that's another weird thing. So in trying to set up a political party, there are weird rules that the FEC has in order to do that. And some of them are very vague, like a certain, like a broad amount of support. And it's just kind of like, well, what what does that mean? Uh, so you have to hold a national convention. It technically can be a convention of 3 people in a room. And you say this is our convention. But so we've decided the best route right now is to be set up as a hybrid PAC, which basically means we have a hard account and an independent expenditure account. And we can take money from people and function as a PAC. And then as we move in towards being able to be a political party, obviously that independent expenditure side will have to go somewhere else, and we'll be an actual political party. And we do anticipate doing that. Like it's not like a pipe dream. It's very much real.
Sure.
What, are you going to allow clapping at your meetings?
We are, surprisingly. Yeah.
I think they're further left than DSA in that
priority
way.
for
Yeah,
me.
exactly. Yeah. So the main thrust of the organization right now is electoral reform,
Yes.
right? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this is what attracted me the most to it, especially after hearing Andrew talk and then reading his book, which he also called forward. So we really kind of took a step back and realized, so what's wrong, right? Nothing's happening, nothing's moving. People are, on your end, you're disaffected kind of lefties who are like, well, heck, like even the squad isn't doing anything for me. And really, when we took a step back and realized it all comes down to the way that the system is working. The electoral system is dysfunctional, like completely dysfunctional. We weren't supposed to have a 2-party system. Washington freaking warned against it when he left. And we instead have become more and more and more of a 2-party system in the past, 70, 50 years, just more and more entrenched, and making it harder and harder and harder for normal candidates, for normal people, for you to have any kind of, different opinion than the status quo and actually successfully run for office. So what we're really focused on is making it easier to vote for someone that you actually want to vote for, and for those people to actually run for office. So we have things like the ranked choice voting, and open primaries, which I can go into some of that if you want me to.
Sure.
Yeah. So right now it's like head against head. So no requirement for a majority to win. There's no thing that we just naturally fall into this 2-party system. And then the primary system really pushes us further and further to the left and the right. So actually 62% of Americans in last year's Gallup poll said they wanted a viable third party. They don't feel like the Democrats or Republicans are representing them at all.
For years.
Yeah, for years and years and years. But with the way that we run our system, that's just not
right.
It's just not going to happen. So someone can win the presidency, can win the local election, can win, a congressional seat, and it's just in the primary system be nominated with less than 50% among voters, which means that when you get to the regular election, the person who wins isn't even representing the majority of the people that voted for them.
Right, you could become the nominee of a major party with 15 million votes in a country of 350 million people.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. In fact, actually, do you know what congressional approval rating is right now? It's
got to be in the teens, I would imagine.
I'm gonna guess 12.
It's between 12 and 20%, depending on the day. Do you know what the re-election rate is for incumbents?
Oh, north of 90.
Yep. 90+%. It's absolutely insane that we don't like Congress as an American people that much, yet 90% of incumbents are reelected. And most of that's to do with the primary system.
And it's a function of the 2-party system.
Yep.
One of the things that you actually reached out to me about, just to get my opinion on it, is whether or not I would be hung up on funding, where you get your funding. Because a big thing on the left is we don't want corporate-backed candidates or a corporate-backed party. And what I told you is what I feel, and I still feel now, which is, all things being equal, I would love to vote for a candidate that does not take any corporate money whatsoever. However, the idea that a viable new party is going to get off the ground, and viable meaning 10+% of the popular vote in a general race. The idea that you're going to do that entirely without any big money bankrolling you is not realistic. That's not going to happen. I mean, Bernie couldn't even win doing that inside one of the two parties, right? He came close, but couldn't overcome all that, right? And, you know, one of the reasons I backed Bernie as hard as I did, and I've said this a million times on this show, is that putting him at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to put someone with that kind of record, that kind of theory of change into the White House. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't bullshitting. That was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it's gone. It ain't going to happen. All right? At least not for at least a decade or two. Priority number one right now, for me, is dismantling the two-party system. And you need a star to do that. And if you need a big organization to come in and bust down the door and do that. And so what I am getting at here is, even if you nominate a candidate as a forward party, or, you know, whoever, who takes this corporate money, let's say Mark Cuban, right? I know there's, you know, he's chirped about running as a third party, whatever. I don't know if he'd run with you guys, but, you know, whatever. Cuban, Trump, Biden. Who do I support? Do I say, well, fuck them all because, you know, Cuban is a billionaire who probably is going to take some corporate money? No, of course you vote for Mark Cuban. It's not even a close call. Trump, right? And it's not that Cuban even has my politics, but that's how you get a third party off the ground. And the reason it's so important, I'm sorry, and this is kind of a long-winded way of making this point. When you say Congress has a favorability rating in the teens, re-election is in the 90s, that's precisely because of the two-party system. It's because people default to the lesser evil. So if you are absolutely horrified by the GOP, as it's reasonable you would be, then you just default to the Democrats. You just assume, because there's only two options, if I'm not one, I must therefore be the other. If there is a third party on the ballot, even if it's not a particularly good third party, even if it's a corporate-backed milquetoast third party, at least then you have engagement that goes beyond defaulting to the lesser evil party. Because now, if you're horrified by the Republicans, you don't just automatically, brainlessly, well, I guess I'm a Democrat. No, because you got two to choose from. And if you had three to choose from, and four to choose from, and five to choose from, that builds engagement and awareness that leads to a more informed and engaged public. So even if the parties are not very good, it's still worth it to, you know, use every ounce of brute force you can to jam a third party into that system that's real, that's viable. With all due respect to the Greens, you know, 0.7 of a point on election day is not viable. Libertarians, 2.3 points. That's not viable. You need, you know, an organization with money behind it, power behind it, with juice behind it, that can do it. And that's worth supporting, even if you don't necessarily like the politics of the person representing that movement.
And so one of the things I can say, like, we want to make the system more open for the Green Party, the People's Party, the Working Families Party, the Libertarians. Like, we want to make the system more open so that they can actually become viable parties. Because if the fact of the matter is, if that's what the American people support, or the majority support, up and down the ballot, that's what you want to represent you. So when we start changing, and it's not just about the presidential, I do agree with you, there does take some, especially in today's world, like a big force that has to get shoved in. And one thing that Andrew actually has joked about is he's going to make ranked choice voting sexy, which is what we're trying to do, right? Because if you start working from the ground up with, you know, state you all the way up to congressional races, and then eventually, you know, a presidential race or whatever. And you vote, you get the primary system to change to open primaries and ranked choice voting. You're going to start getting in candidates, and you're going to be able to vote for people you agree with. You're going to be able to rank them. So even if your first choice doesn't get, you know, supported, maybe your second or third, so they, you know, that they at least represent you in a way. And a study showed that actually 73% of the ballots that ranked like a winning candidate during like a ranked choice voting, 73% of the ballots had chosen the winner of one of their three. So that means 73% of those voters had some sort of investment in that winner. And both sides will tell you ranked choice voting is too complicated. It's too messy. Voters aren't going to get it. We can't pass it. Now there's some states, and particularly on the local level, that have passed ranked choice voting. But when
they're able to do it in Maine.
Oh yeah.
Look at Stephen King. He's a total fucking ding dong. He can figure it out. So can we.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but when you get both the Republicans and
he's not on your donor list, is he? He's not.
I don't think he'd be donating.
You don't have a meeting with him in a few days that you're gonna have to cancel now.
You're gonna have to cancel it. Yeah.
He's way too shit, Libby, to be rolling around in this mud.
It is incredible to me when in one state the Democrats will start pushing for it because they'll realize they're like, wait, I think we can get in, and then they'll want to close the system later, right? But then in another state, the Republicans will push for it. So you'll hear a Democrat say it's too complicated in one state and it's not too complicated in another state because they're really just trying to rig the system. So
sure, they've already rigged it.
Oh,
That's how we got here.
Yes, and they're trying to keep it that way, and it's just so annoying to me when I hear that ranked choice voting is too complicated. Like, are you kidding me? You literally rank something. It's pretty easy. We did it as a sticker competition for our newest like sticker design. I think people know how to rank things.
Well, so it sounds to me like you're less a political party with a platform than an activist cause trying to change the way we do elections.
So I totally get that. And that is something that people have said quite a bit. And we are registered as a PAC right now. And our main thing is electoral reform. Obviously, there have been, we thought about this as well. There have been quite a bit of electoral reform organizations. And it really seems that the groundswell and the activism and the movement comes around parties in the way that our system is functioning now. And so we are determined to be a party. Now, in the future, say ranked choice voting is commonplace, open primaries are commonplace, the system is not nearly as rigged anymore. We'll start having conventions. So we'll decide a platform, and that might be something that Keaton, you don't like, so you're like, okay, well, since the system's open, I'm gonna go join this the fifth political party, and that's fine. Like, that's what we want. We want you to be able to vote for what you want and not what you don't want. And that's just what has just made me so angry, and why I ultimately left is I was so tired of just voting for the Democrats because I just didn't want a Republican, and just feeling like, I mean, on the top level, Biden was my only choice, and on the local level, some handpicked from the Democratic Party local person who will just give their just normal speech and talking points. It was driving me crazy.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as ranked choice voting goes, I'm in the minority, certainly among left-wingers who want to dismantle the two-party system, and having my suspicions about ranked choice voting. I'm not totally sold on ranked choice voting. And I'm not totally sold on ranked choice voting for the simple reason that I think at the end of the day, and perhaps this is not true because both major parties seem pretty opposed to it, but I would think at the end of the day, it still favors the moderate parties. Like, I don't see the Democrats and Republicans as being, a far left and a far right party. I think they're pretty much together on most of the real issues that matter. I don't think they're different enough, honestly, on healthcare, on,
war.
What's that? Wages,
war.
The environment, war, exactly. They're different on, transgender, this and that, right? But they're not different on the issues that affect majorities of people. And my suspicion about ranked choice voting is that it will work the same way that, like, the Oscars have worked. Like, the Oscars use a ranked choice voting system to pick the best picture winner now. And you notice, now that they've switched to that, all these sort of milquetoast lousy movies like The King's Speech, Argo, start winning Best Picture. Why? Not because they have a majority of #1 rankings from people who really love them, but because they're kind of meek, mild popcorn movies that everybody more or less likes. And so you have tons of people ranking them second and third out of 10, and that ups their average to the point where they end up winning. And I feel like that's the same kind of problem you're going to run into with ranked choice voting. Like, yeah, not everybody's going to vote for the socialist ticket on #1, but the people voting for the socialist #1 are probably all going to put Democrat as #2, right? And so what's going to happen is the Democrats are going to win, or the Republicans are going to win, because, whatever, the neo-fascist party that forms is going to be #1 on a lot of ballots, but not that many. They're going to pick Republican #2. And so ultimately, I think you're still going to have a similar problem. What I think is more powerful, and I think you guys have the capacity to do this, which is one of the reasons why I've been generally, I've spoken, generally favorably of the Forward Party, is that you have a star at the top, Andrew Yang, 2 million, social media followers. This is not a joke. That's a hugely important. You have a network. You have the ability to raise money, obviously, thanks to you, and bust through the door and get people to just fuck ranked choice. There's 3. We're voting for a third party. If you nominate a star, people will vote for a star, especially in 2024, when you are very likely going to be faced with a situation that we have not been faced with since, I believe, 1892 or 96, where it's only happened once before in American history that an incumbent has lost and then sought re-election 4 years later. And so what a third-party candidate is going to be able to say is, you are literally being forced to choose between 2 failed incumbents. We have literally tried both of these presidents before, and look where we are. We're right here. If a star is nominated that can, through sheer star power, name ID, whatever, crack 15%, get up on that fucking debate stage and be able to make that point, that's a winning point in the next cycle. I guarantee you it's a winning point. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to win the election.
They'd almost have to run on the line of somebody like the Greens who have ballot access. Like, you'd have to run on the line of somebody who's already built out that network.
Well, you'd have to try and build out that network in time. But anyway, my point...
You're not going to be able to do that in time.
but my point...
Kate knows better than we do. And that's a pretty complicated process, right? It would be pretty impossible to do that in one election cycle, wouldn't it?
You wouldn't even need ballot access in all 50 states if you got 15% in the polls. That's what you would need. You need 15% of polling support, right? You wouldn't have to be on ballot in all 50 states in order to run for president and get on the debate stage. You just need popular support.
Ballot access is definitely something that, obviously, as a future official political party that we are trying to be, is something that we're definitely looking into, ballot access. And yeah, we have a playbook towards stuff. We're definitely, I want to make it very clear, this is not like a platform for Andrew Yang to run for president again. Like, that, it 100% isn't. If you ask him about it, he's very open, saying that he thinks he actually, it actually hurts the country if he runs again. And so this is not just like, let's do this, and then in 2024 he's going to run, and then we're going to be over. We're in it for the long haul. But yes, ballot access is a big part of that.
Yeah, sure thing. No, I'm not even saying you could win the presidency doing that. I'm just saying that, to me, the way to bust down the door is to get people to just make a clean break. Say, forget this ranked thing where, oh, yeah, we'll vote for the person we want, but then we'll vote Democrats second so that they'll win anyway. Well, if that's the case, then just vote for the Democrat. Like, I don't really get the functional difference there.
Well, I think I definitely understand what you're saying. I just don't. Because if you're looking at the presidency, I kind of like that argument makes a lot more sense. But when you start looking at local levels and
well, sure, yeah,
congressional levels,
I would buy that. Okay,
yeah, it's way more likely if you have a approval rating in the teens. I think it's way more likely that it's not, but it's an open primary system and you have ranked choice voting. I think it's way more likely that it's not one of the major 2 parties or the incumbent that wins in that.
These are strange times.
Yeah, and look, I mean, look, I think that that's a good point, and it does that does provide an opportunity for third parties to get votes in their columns and, build out networks and build power. And that's all well and good.
And that's
Mark
why
Cuban with David Portnoy as his VP. You got Musk running to head the science department.
Yeah, exactly.
Like basically all the libertarian Silicon Valley people take it.
But that is why we are very much not just people ask us about 2024 all the time. Makes total sense because our politics are so nationalized nowadays. But we are very, very focused on local all the way up. So, starting from the local elections all the way up and getting ranked choice voting, open primaries, normal people there who can run for office. We're supporting Democrats, Republicans, independents, anyone who agrees with us on the system. So usually it's not fully establishment people, obviously, even if they're running under the banner of a Democrat,
right?
But they support ranked choice voting and open primaries and a couple other progressive or a couple other platforms that maybe we like UBI and things like that. And we support them. So they might run under Republican, they might run under Democrat, they might run under independent, but we have been looking at them and supporting candidates there. So we understand that it's we're not just running candidates right now who are only forward and calling themselves forward, also because of the ballot access, of course. But we are looking at any kind of reform-minded politician or wannabe politician who is running for office.
Okay. That pretty much answered my third question there, so I'll skip over that one. But I've heard Andrew talk a lot about polarization and this sort of polarization and the sort of dysfunction that results from that. But I think a lot of that, I think the dysfunction in Washington also causes a lot of the polarization and makes existing polarization worse. And I've made this point on the show before, so I won't get into a long-winded thing on this, but the short of it is that when people see that the system isn't working and that deals can't be brokered in Washington, they don't feel much of an incentive to get along with each other and work out their differences, right? Because they don't see a payoff to that. Well, why listen to you if I don't like you when there's no results that's going to be satisfactory to both parties if we compromise, because this system doesn't work anyway, right? And so it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. I mean, do you guys have any sort of position on that? Because I think that the sort of simplistic view of it is that, well, the Democrats have gone too far left and the Republicans have gone too far right and there's no room in the middle. But I don't think that's true at all. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think one of the only ways around that is finance reform, which you've talked about with me in the past also. But also, yes, it is this electoral reform. And so, I do see what the Forward Party is doing as very necessary work to be doing, even if that doesn't mean I'm going to support the Forward Party moving forward. I think it's still necessary work for that reason.
Yeah, so I would say it is very much chicken and egg kind of wheel that just keeps going round and round. And I definitely agree with you. It's not necessarily just because the Republicans have gone too far right and the Democrats have gone too far left. It's not that. And from coming from inside the party also, I see how incentivized you are to kind of quote unquote lose. Obviously you want to win your election, but by losing an issue sort of in the big media and mainstream, then you're kind of winning votes and money. And so one thing that I've argued before to some friends, right? So the whole Roe v. Wade thing has just happened. I'm personally pro-choice, and as are most of my friends, and so they're like, how could this happen? And I'm like, well, look, the Democrats have had 50 years to do something and they've done nothing. And then their response to the leak from the Supreme Court was to put up a bill that was designed to fail, which I get making people go on the record for. That's totally fine. But they're going to do that over and over and over again, no matter what.
Right.
because then they can go and they can use that to win
And they
an election.
fundraise off it.
And you fundraise. So, I mean, the amount of money you fundraise off of that stuff is ridiculous coming from a fundraiser. And then,
Then they send James Clyburn down to 2 days later to support Cuellar. So what are you even talking about? What is this bill for? You don't actually give a fuck.
No, and it's real easy to do talking points and to say, yeah, well, it's literally only because of the Republicans and that's the only reason why we're not passing anything. But I'm telling you, if there were 10 Republicans who in this Senate right now were like, maybe if you like brought me something that was like common sense or in between, and we could codify at least some of Roe v. Wade and make our country more like Denmark or something, the Democrats would be like, no, absolutely not. And they would say it's because it doesn't go far enough. And I understand that argument, but then 25 states wouldn't have,
right. So you're saying they would. Okay. So what it sounds like you're saying, and again, I'm not going to go into the specifics of your resume, but this is from a very credible source here, has worked for extreme people that everybody listening to this knows very well. You're saying they would spike a bill to codify parts of Roe v. Wade, or to codify reproductive rights in some capacity. They would spike that bill for the sake of fundraising for the next race, right?
Yeah, and to
rather than put something through that they thought could pass.
Oh, for sure. And it's not just one of the pros at this is Mitch McConnell. The right does it too. I mean, and so I'm not just shitting on the Democrats. I mean, I've been a long unfan of Mitch McConnell, an insanely political genius in our system, but has been horrible for the country. And part of this is straight from his playbook. He something is that you can agree on that, but it doesn't make it doesn't make people mad so that in their primaries they go and vote and then they go and vote against the other person. They're not going to pass that. They're not going to try and pass anything. They want you to be voting against someone, not necessarily for someone.
Right, because that negative partisanship is what fuels fundraising like nothing else,
Absolutely.
Right?
Fundraising,
there's nothing that can fundraise. Right, exactly. And votes nothing raises money like being angry. They fundraised against Susan Collins when she voted for Kavanaugh. Not enough to beat her, but that was a major fundraising day, right? I'm sure O'Rourke had a big fundraising haul after the Texas shooting, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that kind of, that is what animates people to, go on to Act Blue and send money their way.
Absolutely.
And making a deal doesn't.
Yes. And making a deal does not. And that is what is so sad about our system. And it's not just the fundraising. The votes come that way too, because our system is so closed, because we're forced into this two-party system. Exactly. Because I'm not personally, I don't want to go vote for someone who is, anti-choice or super pro-gun. But I do think that there are solutions that you could do moving forward that at least give some people some protection on both sides. And you're just not incentivized to do that when you're an elected official in a two-party system, because right. you get reelected based on people not liking the other person. You don't necessarily get elected based on people liking you. It's just not how it works.
Right. So you're talking in a sense about a kind of different kind of polarization, right? Not necessarily a policy-based polarization, but just a polarization in terms of people's attitudes, right?
Yes.
Towards,
and I think
hate the other side, they're going to write a check to us, right? The policy is sort of like the cards in poker, right? If you're good at poker, it doesn't really matter what cards you have. You can play the hand you want, whatever the card, people are probably never going to find out what cards you have. So the cards would be like whatever policies you have. You never have to show those. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you know how to play the fundraising game, play the culture war game well enough, you're going to raise your money, you're going to keep your gig going, and everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
For you, not for the country.
Yeah. Mitch McConnell used to be pro-choice. Like, a lot of people don't know that. He was pro-choice. Like, and it doesn't, it's pretty interesting. You should look into it. But
like Poppy Bush changed to run with Reagan.
I knew he
Yeah.
was. Yeah, I didn't know about McConnell.
No, that was pretty common with Republicans back then. Like it wasn't until Reagan sold the party out to the Christian right, it was not assumed that a Republican was necessarily pro-life. Right.
Yeah. And so you're just not given an incentive to work across the aisle. I mean, you know, unless yes, Russell, like you're right, like they will pass some sort of thing like wars or, you know, wherever you stand on the Ukraine thing, we just gave a ton of money to Ukraine.
Yeah, that not even a debate.
Yeah, but we can't even.
Just have poor Rand Paul in there.
Yeah, there's no. Yeah, there's another Kentuckian. There is no debate on, you know, giving money to Ukraine, which, you know, I don't know wherever you land on that happened, but there's not even a debate on Roe v. Wade or on gun issues or on anything when the whole country is in an uproar about this. The voters, the people on the ground are in uproars about all these things on both sides of the aisle, and they can't even debate them. Like, this is it's ridiculous.
Well, this is the other function.
It's a collapsing country. There was a really interesting article, I don't know, about a year ago. This guy was from it was Beirut, I think. And he was talking about how the collapse of a society is not what you think it is. People think they're not going to go to work anymore and all the businesses are going to close. So it's not like that. It's not like that. It's just every day the litany of horrors outside your door just keeps growing while you keep going to work. There's more bombings, there's more shootings, there's more horrors, there's more atrocities. But it's not like all of a sudden you can't buy vegetables. It's not like that.
No, I totally hear that. And I mean, one thing that if you've ever listened to Andrew's personal political podcast, you know, he's interviewed people about, you know, if they think a civil war is coming, and obviously we're on like there's like a scaling system. We're somewhere like in the middle, and the polarization does scare me. And that's one of the reasons why we're working with urgency at Forward to try and change the system, which we do think there is definitely other things in play that have been polarizing people. I think very much as we move towards like automation and we have the internet and all that stuff, and people are moving, you know, liberal people move to the cities, conservative people live in the country. Like, obviously not having other people with different opinions live near you adds to polarization and other stuff. But I do think having a functioning democracy and being able to elect people to actually represent you would be a huge boon towards not going into a civil war and towards not like completely collapsing as a country.
Well, on the issue of, you know, because now this week, obviously, guns, reproductive rights, these are the big issues in the news right now. And these are issues that everybody, not just lefties like Russell and I, but everybody, you know, who is either a Democrat now or once was a Democrat until recently, are sort of, you know, on the same page. Okay, we need tighter rules on guns and we need to protect reproductive rights, right? One other result of having a two-party system is that it allows I would say in this case, Democrats, I would say in most cases, Democrats, to sort of skate by on a reputation that they have not really earned. I mean, Russell, one of the things you've always said on the show is that a thing is what it does. A thing is defined by what it does, not by what another thing does, right? Mm-hmm. So because the right has gone so much in the pro-gun...
That's a Marcus Aurelius thing.
Okay, yeah. No, but I mean, you've referenced that on the show a lot, right?
Quite a bit.
Because the right has gone so far in a pro-gun direction and in an anti-choice direction with, you know, 6-week bans and life begins at fertilization, right? It is assumed that the Democrats are the pro-choice party, pro-gun control party. They don't act like a pro-choice party. A pro-choice party is a party that protects choice when it has the power to do so, which they have not done. A pro-gun control party is a party that restricts gun access when it has the power to do so. The Democrats have done neither of those things. They've been able to create this reputation as a pro-choice, anti-gun party because the Republicans are so far in the other direction. Once again, even if it was just one more party on the ballot, one more viable party on the ballot, that would create an imperative for these parties to actually prove they mean what they say, because you can't just assume that because one party is anti-choice, the other party then must be pro-choice, because you'd have two other options to choose from. And the more pro-choice party of those other two is the party you may go and vote for. Right? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, and that's kind of what I was getting at with saying, you know, they're incentivized to kind of just not actually pass anything, because it makes the other party look more and more extreme. Right. And, you know, and that's the other thing, is politics are not two-dimensional. Like, regardless of whether, you know, where I stand on the political spectrum versus, you know, the guy at the bar, you know, I live in rural Kentucky now, stands on the political spectrum, there's certain things that we can agree with, or we can both agree that something at least needs to happen. Right. And we're just both disappointed with our system. He, you know, his elected officials aren't representing him. They're not representing me, and they're not representing the American people. And I think that's ultimately where we're at with Forward, is just trying, as you know, with all due haste, moving forward to, no pun intended, to make the country better and literally open up the system. So not just, you know, pay lip service to people on whatever side of the spectrum you're on, but to actually open up the system so that you can go vote for someone that you believe in, and that you can, you know, have a party, or have not just a party that represents you, but have a whole system that represents you. And actual debates in Congress, which we don't have at all anymore. We won't have debates, you know, on the state level anymore. It is depressing to see. I mean, isn't the Senate supposed to be a deliberative, like a debating place? Right. And they don't do anything. And it's honestly heartbreaking. And Keaton, you know this just from knowing me. I love like American history. I'm a big American history person, in particular, like the electoral American history and Revolutionary War and you know, the founding of America. And it breaks my heart to think that we can't get out of our own way to like make sure this great experiment doesn't fail, because people are so power hungry and obsessed with, you know, just vilifying the other side, and then trying to translate that to voters, and they don't care about voters. And that makes me sad.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I always liked about Yang is that he had a clear-eyed vision of what was going on in the very broad sense that the country is failing. I mean, you know, the standard Democratic response to Donald Trump winning, well, it was, you know, I think Yang even put it this way. He says, you know, racists and Russians were basically, that's what he said. He said, yeah, people like to blame racists and Russians for Donald Trump. And he went up and he said, look, you look at the counties in the states that flipped to Trump, it was where automation, if you look at a graph, the counties where we automated the most jobs out of existence were the counties with the most dramatic Obama to Trump flips. And that alone is a critique of the moment we're in that's just much more finger on the pulse than, well, it was a bunch of white supremacists, you know, and you know, Putin.
Well, but if they get into
trolls, right, exactly.
If they get into that, it demands action.
Well, right, exactly.
They actually have to do something. There's actually a problem to be addressed. It's much easier to just drive everyone crazy with Russiagate propaganda for years than to actually look at the problem and address the problem.
And much more profitable.
And I do have to say, you know, and I think, and Andrew clearly was on the pulse, like, of something, because his presidency blew up. I mean, I know, you know, obviously he didn't win, but so many people loved him, would show up, voted for him when they could. And we're seeing on Forward this really exciting grassroots movement. Let me just brag about our volunteers real fast. Not just our volunteers, our supporters. We have supporters in all 50 states who are signed up, get all our emails, but also go out and do stuff like do example ranked choice voting to try and get signatures on ballots and support the candidates we support and things like that. We have robust street teams in quite a few states, to like volunteer state leads in 34 states out of 50 states already. We started in October. Like, this is how fast it's growing.
Well, this is why I said you got a shot to make something happen in 2024. Maybe not to win, but you got a shot to make something happen.
Yeah, and I can tell you, behind the scenes, I do get some politicos, some members of Congress, and we do hear people being like, oh, we very much commend you for what they're doing. It doesn't mean they're jumping ship yet and joining us yet, because they're scared of the machines, which I totally get. I was too. I was nervous about it. Don't want to lose your career and everything. So, but we're getting a lot of people who are actually very much like, you're doing something that's actually going to be good. But, we have the entrenchment and the incentives that justify people staying in the other political parties for now. So, but I think we have some super, super exciting things coming up this year, and we're growing at a pace that I can't handle. Right? I need help, guys. No, no, we're a small staff, obviously, but it's just the enthusiasm that I see from our supporters and our volunteers. And it's really interesting, right? When I first joined, I was nervous. It was all going to be just Yang Gang people. And actually a huge amount of our support, not Yang Gang, they were like, oh, I knew who Andrew was. But then when he started this and I heard about this, I was like, no, that is what I want to do. And then we're seeing on, both the donor and the volunteer side, just people who've never been involved in politics before become extremely involved and be super excited about this, because they were like, neither party has ever represented me. And I felt completely useless because I can't figure out, where to go or what to do. And now they have something to rally around. And I'm super, I have not once ever regretted getting drunk and sending my cover letter over. So it's been pretty incredible. And our volunteers are insane. And the fact that, insane in a good way. The fact that we have support in all 50 states, robust support, and that we've raised the amount of money that we've raised in just being in existence since October is pretty incredible.
Sounds good to me. Like I said, sounds like you can make something happen pretty quickly. All right. Well, I was going to ask you to get your plugs in before we wrap, but you basically did. Forwardparty.com is the website, right? Yes. You're on Twitter and everything, right?
Yeah. And you can follow Forward Party on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Clever Caitlin, which is spelled with a K, both of them.
We'll post the links to all that in the show notes. Yeah.
But yeah, go to our website. You'll see more of kind of really dig into principles. We do a blog post that really kind of hit at the root. They're kind of articles, very similar to what you guys do on Due Dissidents, with articles and things like that. So, and I'm the finance director. So I got to say, everyone donate. $5 makes a huge difference. You'd be surprised.
There you go. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kate. It was great to talk to you again. And thanks for coming on.
Please clap.